Now, we may well play later on the Dolly Parton version of that. It's For God Only Knows by For King and Country. It is Connect Radio, and every Thursday we like to have a natter about our pets because we do love them, don't we? You know, there's this really nice man, and I wish I knew his name, but he walks his dog in such an interesting routine because it's really early every morning. So when I leave the house, which is usually about 6 a.m., he's walking his dog, no matter what the weather is, no matter if it's dark outside, he's walking his dog, and he looks like a man who is just on a mission, but a joyful mission. And we were talking just the other day, actually, about the fact that he's so happy. And he said, well, what have I got to be sad about? And I was thinking, what a great question. Sorry, a great answer even. So we do love our animals, and in particular, we're going to be talking about dogs today and what happens when your dog sadly swallows something that it shouldn't do. So, Chris, presumably, because dogs tend to eat anything, that's more of a problem for dogs than it would be other animals.
Yeah, that's right, Gareth. I mean, there are other animals will eat things they shouldn't do and get poisoned. But cats are pretty fastidious. Just occasionally they'll get in a muddle. But dogs, it's such a common thing for them to eat something they shouldn't do. I was driving up to Dunbar to go and see my son and daughter-in-law just south of Scotland. And they've got a little dog up there. And I arrived and they're having a barbecue to celebrate their 10-year anniversary. And they were having corn on the cobs. And delicious, but dogs can't digest the cob. You know, they can eat the corn, but the cob is a nightmare. And we've seen dogs getting real muddled with that. And the first thing I did as I shut the door and looked over into the garden was pick up those corn on the cobs because they were laid down and they're sweet. The outside is sweet. The dog thinks it's delicious, swallows it, and it can sit in the stomach for several days, even weeks. But once it starts passing from the stomach into the intestines, it actually causes a blockage and they will not get digested. They'll just sit there and actually will cause the intestines to die off. So it's a really critical thing to keep that sort of thing out. Yeah. So that's dogs just think it tastes delicious. They'll eat it.
Are there different breeds of dogs? Am I right in thinking that there's some breeds of dogs which basically all they tend to do is eat? All they want to do is eat. And then other ones, they tend to sniff the food and then think, oh, I don't fancy that. So do we have to be careful with certain breeds of dogs more than others?
Well, I would say we have a saying in the profession that you know a Labrador's dog dead when it stops eating. Because, you know, it's a Labrador is famous for its appetite. And as a consequence, if you give a Labrador as much food as it'll eat, it will get extremely big and fat. So you have to be careful there. And I had one Labrador that turned up at the surgery one Saturday morning with its whole body linearly shaped. So with the neck stretched out, looking rather uncomfortable. And this was another barbecue incident. He had found a skewer of meat that hadn't been barbecued.
Oh,
I
dear,
thought,
right.
how delicious. And he swallowed the whole thing. So the skewer went straight down his throat, straight into his stomach, and was then poking out through the stomach. So we had to omit it and actually give it a full general anesthetic, open it up, and remove the skewer. And which is relatively simple because you just pulled the skewer out through the stomach wall and then stitched the stomach back together again. And he made a remarkable recovery, and I think still went out eating things he shouldn't have done. But yeah, I mean it was bizarre. Bless him, he's a great dog. But yeah, Labradors are renowned.
Where do we stand, Chris, on the old nursery rhyme, give a dog a bone? Now, my wife you and her, when you meet in August, because I'm over there to come and see, you will get on like a house on fire because she is so passionate about dogs. We'll be out walking and she'll go, that's this type of dog, that's that type of dog. And then I'll ask her to say, so what was it sort of bred for? And she'll tell you she's got a bookcase full of dog books. But she says that you shouldn't really give a dog a bone unless it's used to having them from being a puppy. Is that the case? Or is this something I can argue back with her?
You can argue back a bit, but I would always, say be careful when you argue with your wife, Gareth, because they'll always defeat you. You'll never win. You'll never win. So, but my philosophy with bones, having talked to the raw feeders, because some people like feeding their dogs raw food, and they have a lot of experience in bone feeding, is that bones that are not weight bearing are good for dogs to eat on the whole. You just have to get them used to it. So we say 5 to 10 minutes for a dog to chew on a bone is really good for its teeth. It tends to clean the teeth. It's a bit like a toothbrush. And the sort of bones I look at are rib bones or something from the jaw, that sort of thing. But leg bones are a bit more tricky, particularly cows or bullocks' bones, because they're very hard and they can, as they chew on, particularly the big dogs, can break teeth if they're not careful.
And can these bones fracture and maybe cut, I don't know, cut the gum or maybe cut the mouth? Because I imagine, so I saw next door's dog, which, to be honest, is more like a horse than a dog. It's a Malamute. It's absolutely massive, this thing. And it doesn't bark. It sort of just shouts in this real strange, deep, rumbling sound. But they'd given it what I suppose was some sort of joint bone. I was looking at, and I was thinking that surely if it bites it too hard, it would fracture the bone and little shards of it could hurt its mouth.
Well, that is possible. And like all things, I mean, you could say anything we do to dogs could cause a problem. Taking them for a walk and they run around, they can pull a muscle or damage a ligament, which is something I see on a regular basis, dogs that are lame. But judicious use of bones, so you don't leave them for too long, so don't grind them up. I have had it where somebody's left a dog with a bone for an hour. The dog has loved it, ground the bone up, and then it actually gets constipated with bone in its intestines. And it's pretty miserable because it can't really shift that easily. And it just has to be pain relief and time. But, 5-10 minutes, a non-weight bearing bone. And obviously, if the dog's stomach is designed to cope with raw meat and bones, really. And if you get it gradually used to it, they will be able to cope with that. But generally, my principle is 5 to 10 minutes, you'll be fine. But if you go on longer, there are potential problems.
So it needs to be changed then. Give a dog a non-weight bearing bone rather than just give a dog a bone.
Well, absolutely. That would be a better rhyme, really, Gareth. Yes.
Now, if you have got any questions for Chris about, things that a dog can eat and things that a dog can't eat, or, we've learned something about bones there. You can't just leave it to have it all day long. You have to limit the time or else it could start actually consuming it and then you've got more problems. Do let us know. You can find the link that you need to fire us over a message on WhatsApp. And please don't ever think that I can't ask that, is it? It's a bit of a silly question. I mean, listen, I ask the most ridiculous questions every week to Chris. So if I can, you can as well. Click the link on our app or our website, which will take you through to WhatsApp. Send across a message and we'll be back with Chris after this. As always, some great questions coming through. So thank you for sharing them. And the WhatsApp number, by the way, you can get in touch with us whenever it may be, you just send over a message and somebody will answer it. And if it's relevant to that show, they'll give it a mention. Darren has been in touch and he says, can you ask Chris, please, why it is that dogs can eat meat which is past its sell-by date for human consumption? What is the difference there? And I think what he's hinting to here, because again, our next door neighbour goes to this sort of like animal wholesaler meat farm type thingy. And it tends to be meat which has passed its human consumption sell-by date, but it's okay for animals. Why is there a difference, Chris?
Well, I suspect, truth be known, we could eat that meat as well, Gareth. It wouldn't be so tasty. But if you think my dogs, if they can get a rotten old pheasant that's been shot or something like that, they'll love it. So I think the dog's stomach is phenomenal at killing off bacteria. And so they are designed to eat carrion, if you like. You know, find a dead animal. You see that with the African hunting dogs. They'll eat the dead animals they come across. So the dog's stomach produces this incredible amount of acid, which will kill off most bacteria, and so they're able to withstand it. Unlike us, I think just generally we are not so robust physiologically as dogs are.
And another one about diets. I've always wondered this. Claire sent a message through and says, why is it that dogs can't eat chocolate?
Well, that's a really good question. Now, white chocolate is probably they could eat as much as they would like, you know, because basically that's sugar. The darker the chocolate, the more potential there is for problems. And it's what's called a drug that goes with the cocoa bean called theobromine. So really dark chocolate can be very dangerous to dogs. And we have an app we can go onto the internet and work out, if you know the weight of the dog and what type of chocolate they've eaten, then you can work out whether you need to make them sick and bring it all back, or they need to be emitted and to be put on a drip. But the challenge can be, Gareth, when they don't know how much they've eaten. So they've come in, find they've raided a box of chocolates, and half of those chocolates are soft centers. So they don't have chocolate in them. They're just sugar. And it's just being mindful of how far you need to go to treat. But anything with dark chocolate, we are far more careful with. Yeah.
Now, my friend's dog eats cheese. Is that okay? Will that cause it any problems?
Shouldn't do. I mean, cheese is just a milk protein, really, with fat in it. If he ate a lot, it would probably make him feel a bit because he's got all that fat inside. He might get diarrhea or get the stomach be upset and he'd be vomited back. But generally, the odd bit of cheese is not a problem at all.
Some great questions coming through here. And another one says, can a dog have human medication? Now, let's just... So we're not talking about any human medication. Let's just narrow it down a bit. And presumably they're meaning something like, if you sense that your dog isn't very well, or maybe it's pulled a muscle, like we spoke about earlier on, and you know it's pulled a muscle, could you give it half a paracetamol?
Yeah, paracetamol for dogs is one medicine we do use. And a lot of the medicines we use in veterinary medicine come from the human field. So for epilepsy, we'll be using human medications, but they've been formulated for dogs. Different antibiotics all are used from the human field. But you just have to be a bit careful because if you give them ibuprofen, that can be really toxic to a dog. And paracetamol for cats is very bad as well. So you could, I remember my mum using an aspirin when our dog looked a bit off colour and he perking up, this little terrier. So, if you think about it, half a paracetamol for a Labrador-sized dog, quarter of a paracetamol for a smaller dog. But when you get down to the really small dogs, it gets a bit more challenging. You want to talk to your vets then.
Yeah, I mean, we probably want to put this out there that you need to seek professional advice. If you see your dog limping, don't think, I'll give him 3 of these. He'll be okay. Get the expertise of the experts. But that does sound like a great band name, Paracetamol for Cats, who will be performing live in our live lounge later on this evening. Looking forward to that. Chris, it is always a pleasure. Thank you very much. And as we always say, if you've got any doubt about your animal, if it looks off colour, then go and see your vet. Please do not just sort of self-medicate it and think, oh, we'll give you some of those. It'll be okay. Chris won't be with us for the next 2 weeks because you're at a veterinary fair next week. And
that's right, the London Vet Show, Gareth. Yep.
So
getting educated.
At the London Vet Show, I imagine it's just hundreds of you walking around admiring treatment procedures.
Yeah, and going to lectures and catching up with old friends. And it's a really great place to be for 2 days, to just fill yourself up with the latest veterinary knowledge.
And do you talk about anything other than animals and the industry?
Yeah, you talk about when you meet up with friends, you talk about how their family's doing.
I think I once had a conversation about a Ford Escort, but then we went back to veterinary talk. Chris, you're a blessing. Thank you very much. And then the week after next, you're going to, this is very exciting, you're going to America to spend Thanksgiving with your son, who you haven't seen in 4 years.
Yeah, it's going to be great. Going to see my youngest grandson, who is now 18 months, Moses.
Oh, wow!
So it's going to be a blast. Three grandsons over there.
Wow. Well, safe travels, and the next time we speak, we'll be even closer to Christmas.